Psychology in Seattle.
Umberto, have you heard about the furries? Have you heard of the furry culture, people?
Like the Greek Furies, you know?
No, the furries, the people who dress up in furry outfits.
Oh, like when it's wintertime or the Inuit.
No, they just like furry, like teddy bears and...
Oh, that kind of furries. I guess I have heard, yes.
So patron Kim wrote in and said, is it a sexual deviant thing? And why does this community attract so many sexual deviants?
Wait a minute. Okay. That's hilarious. Is it at all about sexual deviancy? And by the way, why are they all sexual deviants?
So let's get into it. Let's talk about what the psychology is behind furries and just how sexually deviant it is.
That sounds sexually interesting.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor.
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I run an organic clinic that specializes in bee morticians.
So long story short, it's not a deviant thing. I actually didn't read Patron Kim's entire email, so I probably was mischaracterizing her overall question, but long story short, it's not, but let's get into it. But before we do that, I want to provide a caveat that I'm not an expert on furries. I'm not a furry. I've never been to a furry convention. I have done some research. I've looked up some science, and I've reached out to actual furries and talked with them about this. So, just take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt. I'm obviously not going to know all the lingo and all the different nuances,
right?
But I feel confident I can speak with some authority.
I'm actually really experienced because when I was 7, I dressed up, maybe I was 8, I dressed up as a werewolf for Halloween. And I've also been Chewbacca, so.
Right, that's something we'll get into later, is all of us technically are furries because at some point in our life, we have enjoyed a teddy bear or dressed up in an outfit or...
I mean, to be fair, for me, it was drawing the hair on my skin, but still.
But that is... We'll get into it. It's essentially that. Anyway, so an anonymous patron wrote in and provided the following story. I was involved in the furry community for about 8 years, starting in 2004, way back when, creating costumes, wearing them, even helping to run conventions. In my part of the country, the fandom skews very young, and I am in my 40s, and I'm a woman, so I feel pretty awkward to show up amongst a sea of college-age men. My way into the fandom was through art. I have always been a cartoonist and loved to sew stuffed animals, even as a young child. It wasn't a sexual thing for me, although I did have friends for whom it was a fetish. In general, the custom costumes are so expensive that the ones you see out in public aren't the ones that you will also see in the bedroom.
Custom costumes.
No joke, these costumes these days run between $3,000 to $6,000.
Yikes!
Some of these people are very fantasy prone, and it feels like they are finally, quote unquote, themselves. Some of these folks may feel almost like the alter ego is a spirit animal of sorts, and others come to furry from a performance and acting perspective.
So furry is like a noun.
Right. I just realized that in this email.
Yeah.
And for some, it's like Halloween, where you just want to get to be someone else for a while. Okay, so Berto, let's define, what is a furry?
I guess someone who wants to dress up in a costume of some sort. Maybe ideally it has fur to it and they want to role play, perhaps.
Okay. Yeah. So there are different sorts. That's one sort, but there's a lot of different sorts, and we'll get into the statistics. Actually, only a minority of people who identify as furry have a fur suit.
What?
Yeah.
We need a new label here.
Right. So, but once we get into this, it'll start making more sense. So some like to dress up in a cute furry costume.
Uh-huh.
Some just like the art online.
Do you think Nick Fury is a furry?
Some like to fantasize about being another animal. Some have a sexual component to it, like they fantasize about having sex with an animal or an animal-human hybrid or something. It's part of their sexual life.
Like a satyr or something.
Yeah. Or like there's plenty of anime characters who are hybrids.
Centaurs.
Yeah. Well, you keep going to Greek.
My Little Ponies.
Yeah. It's or like Mickey Mouse, Mickey and Minnie or something,
You don't have to do Greek. You could do any number of things.
You could. Some actually want to be another animal. So to me, as I started looking into this, on the surface of this, it's very similar to Trekkies or Star Wars fans, or even sports fans, as far as I can tell. They love this particular thing dearly. Right. They're super into it. They're nerds for it. They go online and look at pictures and videos. As a Seahawks fan, as a UW Husky fan, I will during football season, I listen to Seahawks podcasts. I listen to Huskies podcasts. I watch the games. People around me are like, why are you spending so much time watching football? I go to the games. When you go to the games, everyone dresses up in
furries.
Actually, what I've noticed in the past 20 years is that fans are everyone dresses up in some of the color. Like when you go to a Seahawks game, the stands, it's all blue and that limey green color.
Yeah.
And when you go to Husky games, it's all purple and gold. 20 years ago, up until 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. Like to see someone dressed up in that full-on outfit at a football game, they were a weirdo. Now, typical Seahawks game, you'll see hundreds of people dressed like in
the full-on.
Yeah, with full mohawks and face makeup, and they're just regular people now. They used to be like the complete weirdos. And so I think as our country becomes more affluent, and I think more hobby-oriented, because when you think 20, 30, 40 years ago, my parents anyway, there wasn't this emphasis on hobbies the way that there are today among adults. You know what I mean?
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, think about...
Hobby is such an antiquated word.
But it's like hobbies of the generation before us was like, maybe fishing.
Sure.
Maybe knitting or something. But not like full-on super nerddom. And I mean, most adults have something that... but they wouldn't even define themselves as a super nerd. But when you look around their house, it's like, well, how many Seahawks memorabilia things do you have around your house? Just count them.
Sure.
All the beer cozies, all the coins, the stickers, the calendars.
Right.
The bobbleheads, the Christmas lights in the front of the yard, the sticker on your car. Hate to break this to you, but you're a super nerd.
Your wallet.
Yeah, you're a super nerd for this thing called football.
Yeah. But okay, so that's fair. But I feel like people used to collect stamps. They don't collect stamps nowadays,
Well, some
people
do.
But you know what I mean.
Certainly, totally. But
Yeah.
I think that was rarer. And because, previous to 20, 30 years ago, the vast majority of people had kids, and they had lots of kids.
Yeah.
The average family was like 3+. So, you'd have like 5, 6 kids.
Yeah.
And you don't have time as a parent for hobbies. Plus, there wasn't this kind of culture where you could even really participate. That's why stamp collecting was a thing, because it's just something you could possibly get and save, right? Because you get stamps in the mail. But like the people today, there's an entire store called Hobby Lobby,
Yeah.
There's entire sections of Bed Bath & Beyond that are just dedicated to football and soccer.
Yeah.
There's entire stores dedicated to bobbleheads and anime figures. That kind of thing did not exist when we were kids.
Interesting.
I mean, just think back. That stuff, like when we were kids, the biggest thing was Star Wars figures, right?
Right.
But even those, for when the first Star Wars movie came out, they had no idea the demand that they ran out of things.
You could buy a couple toys at first.
Right. And most movies didn't have action figures. You just think about that. You go to Raiders of the Lost Ark, and there's nothing to do beyond that. There's no internet. There's no posters. There's no figures. There's no video game. There's no fan fiction. There's no YouTube channels. There's no
Certainly.
there's no reviews. There's no recaps. There's no predictions for the next one. It's just you just go to the movie and you go home, and that's it.
Growing up in Colombia, the sports thing was always there. Like, people have always been obsessed with their soccer team, and I guess that was a thing where people did have all sorts of sports paraphernalia. I guess they wouldn't dress up in suits. That's the thing. But they definitely had all sorts of posters and banners and shirts and things. But I also know that, maybe, actually more popular in this country even, I think people's group identity used to maybe males anyways, used to be around things like Boy Scouts growing up, and then maybe later you might be in a frat, and then maybe later you might be in one of those like the Masons or the hunting lodge or whatever the heck it is.
Right. And so today, since those things are falling out of fashion, or there's more plurality around these kinds of things, there's all these other things that crop up, like furries. So to me, when I started really looking into it, I was like, oh, when you really look at the furry culture, it's really just one of those nerd sections, like Trekkies or Star Wars fans or sports fans. And, also, but then you think, well, you said, sports fans, they don't dress up in furry costumes. Well, how many times have you and I dressed up as a Star Wars character? Right. Or, you did Harry Pooter or whatever.
Harry Pooter? What the?
That was when you're Poe Dameron and Harry Potter and Chewbacca all at the same time.
Wasn't it Harry Pobacca or Poe? I can't remember.
So I've dressed up as Luke as a kid. I've dressed up as Han as an adult. I have gone as Sam from Sunrise Kingdom. I've dressed up as Wesley from The Princess Bride, and I've even gone as Captain Kirk to Halloween. And I did not take these things lightly. It was a big deal, I had the gun, and it felt fun to play Captain Kirk for a night. So that's in a nutshell. So some people like to dress in furry costumes, some don't. Some are into the art online, some aren't. Some are into like fan fiction, some aren't. Some people like to fantasize about being another animal. For some, there's a sexual component, and for some, they actually want to be another animal. There's this thing called a fursona. Can you imagine what that is?
A fursona?
Yeah.
Like a persona, but furry?
Yeah, exactly. So
you have your normal personality,
yeah,
and then you put on your fursona.
So as I was saying earlier, there's a lot of variety for furries, but this is actually something that there's not a lot. According to one survey, 95% of furries have a fursona. So this is what you're saying, basically a persona. That's their furry persona. They, when they go online or when they're at conventions, they might actually pretend this fursona. So if they're a fox, a vixen-y fox girl.
What would they say?
Yeah. Well, for some, I think they literally just make sounds like a fox. I think that's actually true. Now, for some of these people, it can be very casual, like dressing up as Captain Kirk and saying, canon statements like "Beam me up, Scotty." Just joking. But for some, it can be quite serious, where they feel like they're actually stepping into their real skin in a sense.
Oh, interesting.
What would be your fursona?
My fursona would be like some sort of gorilla outfit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't you have a gorilla tattoo?
Gorberto.
Don't you have a gorilla tattoo?
I do, yeah.
Why?
I identify with both. I love the fact that gorillas are these like massive, strong creatures, and yet they're very chill, kind of zen. They take their time. They're veggie eaters, So this is interesting because when we were in a band together, and actually more pointedly, before I was in a band with you, yeah,
you're in this band called Missionary,
right?
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you and the other band members, you created this world where each of you was like a different animal, different spirit animal or something.
Yeah.
So you were the gorilla.
Yep.
and other bandmates were different animals.
Well, it actually was a little trickier than that. We had a gorilla and a small chimp, and each of us were additional entities.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like a fursona.
Total fursona.
And you actually developed a little comic book.
Yeah.
So as you thought about your band, you thought it would be fun to adopt these other...
Right.
And it wasn't just frivolous. You also felt like it kind of represented your characters.
Yes, because the whole idea was, a spin on the whole concept of a missionary. The missionary was this kind of Christian entity moving into a savage world and converting the natives. But instead we thought, well, what if the forest, the jungle, and the spirits were the missionaries coming to convert the humans, and so each of us was sort of like a jester character from different mythology, not jester, like a prankster, like Loki sort of, but from different mythologies. And then the gorilla spirit and the chimp, they were sort of the sun and the moon of this thing.
So it's very furry.
Very furry.
Where the animals come and help to make the humans more animalistic.
Yeah.
So there's this other thing called fursuiting. Can you imagine what that is?
I figure like they're dressed in fur and then they wear a suit on top of the fur.
Yeah.
Really?
They wear a fursuit. And what percentage of fur...
sorry, because for a second I imagined like that character in Hanna-Barbera. He's like a gorilla, but he's got like a nice little hat and like the little bow tie. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Vaguely.
Yeah, it's like that. Like I imagine like they're dressed in furry and then a suit. But anyways, you're saying that's when they suit up.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what percentage of people who identify as a furry own a full suit?
Well, it sounds like you kind of spoiled the party here. I would have said like 99%, but now I'm going to go 60%.
13.
Whoa.
13%.
They only have to be, so there's no pre-qualifications here. You could be a furry without owning a furry costume, but the majority of them.
Most don't.
So what do they own? What makes
Nothing.
them a furry?
Nothing. They don't own any fursuit.
Do they just voyeur?
About half of them own a tail.
Oh.
So or and maybe some more own like
Ears
or something. Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. So they don't go full furry.
Well, but I think part of this is that you have an expectation about what furries are,
Yeah.
because of what little media has paid attention to it
Right.
and you've consumed. And I'm here to break some of those myths. Is that furry does not mean you have a fursuit. In fact, most furries don't have a fursuit. It's much more than that. There's this other thing called otherkin. Have you heard of this before?
Yeah, I have. Isn't this where it's like you have like an animal that's your alter or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
like a cat or...
Right.
Yeah.
So a woman might be like, I'm otherkin. I'm not really human. I'm not really...
Oh, right. It's not that... Yeah, they actually are like, I'm not human. I'm a cat.
Right.
Yeah.
They identify as another animal or partially as another animal.
And there's people that go through extreme lengths to modify their physical appearance.
Right. So there are people like that.
Yeah.
And, each to their own. But again, most people who are otherkin don't do anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just internal. They don't do any plastic surgery or
I
anything
see.
like that. In fact, I would venture to say 99.999% of furries don't do any plastic surgery or tattooing to make themselves look like the animal.
Who would be your other kin?
Oh, so for me, I've always said a duck.
A duck? You'd be a duck. Tell me more.
Well, one, I'm sick and tired of everyone choosing all the cool animals.
And you feel a duck's getting the shaft.
Right, and it's just like, it's so predictable. Oh, I'm a wolf.
You could fly.
Or I'm a cat.
Right.
Or I'm a leopard. And it's like, right, so to me, I'm about pragmatics. So ducks can fly,
Right.
which is awesome.
That is
Imagine being
awesome.
able to fly.
Yeah.
They can walk, and
Right.
they can swim, and they can swim underwater.
Because see, if I was going to go the flight route, I would definitely go more like hawk,
Because hawks are cool.
Well, they're badass, not just cool. but I wouldn't go full eagle,
Hawks and eagles are. Some hawks are more badass than any eagle.
That's why I'm giving up the square on the board that I don't really care about because I want the hawk square.
In fact, could be all wrong, but you know that sound that you associate with an eagle, that's actually from my memory not an eagle, it's actually a hawk.
Really?
Yeah. The sound that bald eagles make anyway, it's actually, you'd be surprised what the sound actually is.
Oh, really?
I've actually heard, because I used to have some living by me in Lake City, and they make actually really interesting noises. I think when they mate, they like fly around in the sky and they make this really kind of weird.
I used to go shooting the bald eagles, but I guess I must have gotten them before they made any sounds.
Yeah. So other kin are people who identify as another animal. And people use this term quite in a variety of ways, but, so just keep that in mind. So what percentage of furries say they do not feel 100% human?
Oh, interesting. Well, 5%.
35%.
Wow.
So about a third of them say, I feel like I'm part non-human.
So it's way more of a defining characteristic of a furry that they don't fully feel human than they own a full furry suit.
Right. So you're seeing what I was seeing, was that being furry is less about dressing up in a fursuit and more about your identity as a human, as a person. Also, what about non-furries? Because, non-furries could identify as not feeling entirely human.
Okay,
so,
well,
what percent?
5%.
Yeah, close, about 7%.
That's surprisingly high.
So,
how do you define
non-furries, so just, non-furries.
Yeah.
7% of them say they do not feel entirely human.
Okay.
So there's a lot of people, 7% of people.
Right.
United States, what is that? Like 7 times 35? It's like
potatoes.
220, what is that? 220,000?
Are we up to
Or
350 million?
Wait, no. 222 million-ish people?
Yeah. Are we up to 350 million?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow. Yeah. So it'd be 35 for 10 and roughly.
So yeah, about 22 million Americans do not identify as, so there's way more non-furries who would identify as otherkin if they were given, the definition.
That's insane.
Than there are furries. So you could see how the thing like the furry thing could be attractive because it's like there's so many people who think of themselves as being part wolf or part eagle or part duck or part cockroach or whatever they do.
Huh.
So now some of these people consider it to be just a spiritual thing. They're just like, in my soul, I am connected to leopards. But other people not. It's more like a physical thing, more like I feel like I am more like blank, right?
Yeah.
And what percentage of them actually think they are physically different, like they were born part whatever animal?
Okay, well then 10%.
Good, 10%.
Wow.
And what percent wish that they were not human of furries?
That they were not human?
Yeah.
At all?
Yeah.
Oh, jeepers, creepers. 7%.
45.
Wait a minute. So there is a segment of them that feel that they are fully human, but they wish they were not.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
A significant chunk.
I'd love to talk to one of those people and just ask them, like, so what animal do you wish you were? Like, and
do you do you
if
realize that once,
if you snap your fingers, would you, given the intelligence level of that animal,
the fact that you won't remember that you wanted to not be human or who you are or what this is all even about.
Or maybe the way they interpreted that question was they would retain their personality.
Oh, that's okay.
I guess. Anyway, what percentage say they would be 0% human if they could? Well, that's basically the same question. That's about 39%.
Yeah.
What about non-furries? What percentage said they would be 0% human if they could?
Jesus. Okay. Well, 5%.
10%.
No.
So a lot of people, well, so why is this distressing to you? Because I think this is part of where the stigma comes from. There's something distressing to non-furries to hear about these kinds of.
I guess I always get distressed about lack of logic. And so this sounds completely like doo-doo-doo. I wish I was completely not human. And it's different than, because I don't want to make fun of like, I'm depressed, I don't want to exist. Like, okay, that is not a funny thing. To me, it's funny when you're like, I am this creature, but I wish I was a completely different creature. And maybe there's nothing funny, but to me, it sounds funny.
Right. So there's something odd about it that really gets people going.
Yeah.
And your reaction was like, oh my God, 10% of people. But it's like, who gives a fuck? It's just in their heads.
Sure.
Like what is it? What's it to you? There are people who walk around in some very weird outfits that we would never wear. And I just say, God bless them. They're dressed up in how they want to dress.
Well, I guess what it's to me is that it's a very big misunderstanding about the nature of their existence to even be able to answer that question and say, yeah, and as I'm entitled to talk and converse with you and give opinions, wish I was something that has none of the above. It's just interesting. It's like,
well, one could say that this is similar to trans people, right?
But the difference with trans people is that they are not giving up their humanity at all.
But they're giving up their quote unquote gender, their born gender.
Yeah, I know, but it's they're not going to not remember that. They're not going to not like, have even the ability to appreciate what they've done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that your argument against them is, to paraphrase, is it's impossible and they don't really know what they want.
Well, I guess I should clarify. It's not even an argument against them. I just find it universally ironic because the only creatures that can even be asked the questions are the only creatures that are advanced enough to have that capability. And so it's interesting to me that you would want to swap for anything else.
And some in my community, I'm guessing, agree with you in that some are proposing that a diagnosis in the DSM be researched called species identity disorder, which is akin to gender identity disorder.
Well, and I definitely want to caution that, like, there's a big difference between, hey, man, I just have this crazy, wacky thought every now and then, but it doesn't affect my life.
Right.
As opposed to like, yeah, I stopped going to work. I've stopped eating. I'm eating grass, even though I can't digest cellulose, because I want to become a pig, or something, like, it's like, okay, now we should have a conversation.
So I want to add to that one. So if I had a client come to me and say something along those lines, one of the things I'd start assessing for was psychosis. Mm-hmm. To believe that you actually are a pig.
Yeah.
And to be living your life by eating grass and not fully aware of the fact that, at least biologically, you're not a pig.
Right.
I would wonder about psychosis. Now, I would also, given the research here, is like, well, I wonder if they're just like really into this. Now, later in this episode, we'll talk about why I think people develop these kinds of proclivities. But just getting into more stats here, what percentage of furries are also bronies?
Okay. I would say there's a high correlation, but it's maybe 30%.
Close, 24.
Okay.
What percentage are anime fans?
Oh, yeah, 50%.
Close, 44.
Okay.
What percentage are white?
60%.
90%.
90%. So actually, I'm going to make a very controversial statement.
What?
You kind of have to be in a privileged class in a part of the world that is privileged during non-war times for this to even be a thing.
Perhaps.
Because you need the freedom and the free time to run out. You've run out of ideas. You're like, okay, I've done everything. I've played, I've skydived, and now I need to become a furry.
What percentage
Oh my God, I'm going to get a lot of hate.
What percentage are male?
70.
80.
Wow, that's actually even higher than I thought.
What percentage are under the age of 30?
Oh, Under the age of 30. 70%.
Yeah, 88%.
88%.
So the
They're
vast,
all higher than I would expect.
the vast majority of it seems. I mean, when you get up to numbers like 90% white,
Yeah.
and 80% male, and almost 90% below 30, you're looking at like you go to a furry convention, and you're just going to see a sea of 23-year-old white guys.
Okay, is there a correlation with homosexuality?
So what percentage? So the general population, gay, bisexual, percentage wise is what?
20%.
No, general population.
10%.
Wow, you are from Seattle.
2%.
It's close. It's between like 2 and 5%.
Sorry, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
I mean, you said 20%.
I don't know what I was talking about.
Oh, okay.
No, you're right. I should have thought it through. You're right, and I am in an environment where it makes it feel between San Francisco and here. It's like, yeah, everyone is this way.
Right. And what percentage of furries identify as gay or bi?
10%.
20%.
Whoa, so that was my original
Right.
bad guess for the general pop.
Right. So, although most furries are hetero,
Yeah.
they have a much higher rate of being gay and bi and trans. Are they more or less or the same left-leaning?
Oh, that I would have answered in previous years. I would have said, "Oh yeah, it's like 99% left-leaning."
I don't know the percentage, but what are they more or less?
I'd say more left-leaning.
Yeah, they're more likely. What percentage are atheist?
60%.
44. I think it's another Seattle thing in your head
Yeah.
right there. What percentage have children?
20%.
4%.
4%. Okay.
One, they're so young.
Yeah.
And two,
And they're busy being furries.
maybe.
Yeah.
How many are in relationships? What percentage?
I'll be generous. 50%.
Yeah. Which is probably similar to general pop of that age. And what percentage of those people in relationships are in a relationship with another furry?
Oh, 70%.
Good. 76. So there's a lot of, cross-pollination between couples happening.
Do they have to be Polynesian?
So with conventions, do you know the names of the biggest furry conventions?
FurryCon.
Nope. Well, one, they got kind of close to one.
FurCon.
Midwest Fur Fest.
Okay.
How many people do you think go? So to give you some comparison, PAX Prime in Seattle has about 70,000 attendees.
Okay.
Comic-Con in New York City has about 130,000. Midwest Fur Fest is the largest with how many people?
10,000.
Ooh, good. 11,000.
Okay.
And then Anthrocon is the second largest.
Anthrocon.
Only 7,000. So it's the second largest one. So some of the terminology I didn't get into is they will often use the term anthropomorphize.
Oh,
Or
I see. Of course.
anthropomorphic.
Okay, so
Right.
they're applying more to my point. They're applying human characteristics to non-human entities.
What's the point?
Well, that's my point. Is like you can only get these behaviors if you are human. You can't get them if you're anything else.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a break. When we get back, let's talk about the psychology. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right. We're back from the break. If your furry persona, the gorilla, were to compel the listeners to become a patron, what would the fursona say?
Number 1, I like bananas. Number 2, I like breaking down bamboo trees. Number 3, you donate or I pull arms out like Chewbacca.
Wait, now the gorilla has a fursona that it's
Yes, he's a chewy Sona. Why wouldn't a gorilla? Don't you think if you're a gorilla and you see like this extra tall and light-haired gorilla dude
with a laser gun,
a bandolier and a laser gun, you're like, ooh, that's different.
Yeah.
That looks like my orangutan cousin, but not related. So
It's always bothered me, and I hate to admit it, but like a crossbow laser gun. One, two, no one else in that universe uses a crossbow laser gun. Three, that gun for some reason is like 100 times more powerful than any other blaster.
Well, it is in the new movies.
Yeah.
Was it always that way?
Oh, no.
Maybe not.
I think in 4, 5, 6, it was just
But you're right. What is crossbowing about it?
Yeah. I mean, they put these little balls at the end of the thing. They make it look like maybe there's like
maybe it's focusing the laser beams more.
Yeah. I just think, it just shows how easily, if a number of those things would have piled up in George Lucas's decision making, how bad those first movies could have been.
Right.
Because like just point to like crossbow.
Okay, so he'll have a crossbow. Crossbow.
Anyway, so the psychology of furries. Let's talk about it here. So now the bottom line. So what's the bottom line? The topic sentence of why people involve themselves in the furry community. What would be the bottom line? Do you think I would say?
White privilege. No, just kidding. Wanting to belong to a group.
That's a good guess. The bottom line actually is we have no freaking idea.
Okay.
Because we don't know why anyone does anything, really. We can only look for associations and
well, we know why they do some stuff, like breathe.
Right,
eat,
but you don't know
sleep.
why people vote the way they do, or why people dress the way they do, or why people murder people, or why people eat,
Not at the individual level, but at the group level, we can make a lot of approximations.
No, we can't.
We can.
Name one thing along those lines that you could
we can approximate why people dress the way they dress.
approximate is a very funny word.
Well, sure, but we can say, why do people wear pants? Well, why do men wear pants versus women wear skirts? Well, we can make approximations about those.
Approximations, for sure.
Sure. But I mean, like I'm saying, we can't say why Sally today wore a skirt exactly, but we can say why women in general wear skirts and men in general wear pants.
No, you can't. So we can make a statement. We can make a statement. Anyone who knows anything about, and I think this is important to point out, not for this episode, but for all episodes. Why is the moon going around the Earth?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Well, because the motion was established such that it was trying to escape, and the gravity between the two pulled it back into orbit.
Right. And there's general relativity in there as well, and gravity wells and blah, blah, blah. And there's even quantum physics in there at some level. But there are scientific measurements that you can repeat over and over and over again. You can look at other bodies in the heavens and see that they operate in exactly the same way, given the mass and the velocity, the distance from the orbiting body. There are just countless upon countless measurements, precision down to like 0.000000001%. They can predict the motion and the mass and blah blah. When it comes to measuring human beings and their behavior, we have nothing like that. There's nothing like that where you can point to a thing and say, this is why. We have models for understanding people. We have models for understanding. We have models for making potential predictions. But you can't point at you can point. So let's say we look at another solar system through the galaxy, and we see a star and we see a planet, and we can measure somehow by, transit method, the velocity of the planet, the distance of the planet from that sun. And we can predict down to 0.0001% accuracy how fast that thing is moving around that star, right?
Yeah, but
you can't point to Sally across the street and say, I know exactly what outfit she's going to wear tomorrow.
Well, yeah, but again, so the degrees of freedom of the examples you're giving at the macro level are teeny insignificant,
right?
Compared to but at the same time,
that's the point.
But you're wearing a T-shirt with a Millennium Falcon on it.
Yeah.
Someone predicted pretty well that if they made a whole bunch of those, they would sell T-shirts. And this happens all the time. Now, some people make bad predictions, but marketers make a living out of figuring out how to market.
Do you know how, for every one of the shirt that I have on right now, do you know how many people thought they had predicted correctly in marketing a T-shirt and failed?
Yeah, but
that's backwards statistics.
No. Actually, I would say that based on the capitalistic growth of this country in the last 100 years, excusing for abuses, actually, I would say that most people end up predicting fairly well over the large scale what
Most
people want.
people, okay, so let's, even if that's correct, which it's not necessarily true, predicting economies is hard. One,
Yeah, but I'm not saying like you're like, I'm betting on the stock market. I'm saying that at a macro level, people are like, one person's like, I'm going to establish a restaurant. Okay, they fail, but 10 others don't. And then in 100 years, we look at the capitalist growth and it's like, yeah, actually people have made money.
okay, maybe we're not arguing about the same thing.
We might not.
My point is that when we ask a question, why is someone a furry?
Sure.
We have no scientific way of answering that question.
There is no precise anywhere near, forget like 10-digit precision. You can't give a number about it.
You don't even know what you're looking at. There,
Sure.
You know, with gravity, at least we can point to a thing in the sky and say, that thing is rotating around this other thing.
Well, but
when we're pointing at
yeah.
a person in a furry suit, I don't even know what I'm pointing. Are we pointing at their brain? Are we pointing at a part of their brain?
Yeah, but to poke a hole in this train of thinking is, if you rewind the clock, say 1,000 years, same was true for all the examples you gave. It was even worse.
Yeah.
It was even worse. We had it so wrong.
How does that poke a hole in what I'm saying?
Because someone had to start making guesses and then start trying to test things. And so we can make educated guesses and try to test them.
And fail because we have no technology to test that.
But we can keep trying.
We can. How does that poke a hole? How does me saying we don't know the answer say that we shouldn't try?
Okay, because I feel...
Because you just don't
I
like
often
me shutting down you making a hypothesis.
No. I often feel that the implication is we might as well give up.
That's not the implication.
That's how I feel.
Well, that's that, and
Because you
that's
didn't predict my behavior properly.
well, and that's what I think a lot of people do in our society. They're just like, so wait, like we don't know anything. Like, well, we should just give up. I'm like, how did you get there? How did you get from 1,000 years ago when they were looking up at the skies and they're, Galileo's great-great-grandfather or something is talking to his friend and they're like, well, I don't know. It's like, did God put it there? Or maybe there's another explanation. Well, we don't know. Well, we should just give up. Like, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like, we should know where we're at. That Galileo's great-great-grandfather should know that they don't have the telescope to look. They don't know. They don't have the answers. Maybe one day we will, and we should strive. We should try to figure out how to answer questions.
So again, and this is probably a projection or a projected projection, in fact. I sometimes feel that this leads us down a path of like, it's because it's so mystical, that humans are so mystical that we can't even begin to crack the problem. But we have this problem with ants, right? Like we don't really have a science of ants.
Just because we don't understand and exactly Galileo's great-great-grandfather looks up at the sky and says, I can't explain why those things are doing what they're doing.
Right.
Now, one could make the mystical argument, say, well, it's God or magic. Or you can just say, we just don't have the technology to answer that scientifically yet. And that's where we're at when it comes to psychology and human behavior. We're just not at the point where we can answer those questions yet. We can make some macro level, tentative, suggestive, predictions. And we can make, pretty good, like I'm going to get into it. I'm going to get into various different speculation that I like.
Yeah.
But I just have to couch it in the fact that it's not like pointing at the moon and saying, I know why the moon's going around the earth. It's me making some guesses that come from my cultural clearing in the wilderness, that come from my own bias, that come from what fits well with me, and I have no way of measuring it. And particularly because the psychological community hasn't looked into this yet because it's relatively new in our culture, and I'm guessing not a lot of people are super interested in researching it. So anyway. All right. So the bottom line is we don't really know, but we can make some speculations, and let's get into that. So what are some speculations, bro? Like, why are people furries? You said one, friends. Is that what you said?
Yeah. I think that in the postmodern 20th century, and certainly in the 21st century, there was a sense in which sort of it started becoming okay to question fundamental assumptions about who you are and what your place is. And therefore, it became just on a bell curve, it became possible for some percentage of people who probably would have had the same questions 2,000 years ago to be like, oh, not only do I have these weird, vague notions in my mind, but I can probably actually do something about it. Like I could actually dress up in a weird way.
Yeah, it's interesting. Particularly when you look at those stats about how non-furries, so many of them think of themselves as not being entirely human.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, maybe this is something that is, and we need more research into this. It's limited in terms of stuff that I looked at. But maybe this is something that's universal across all cultures.
Yeah, like, what if, again, I mean, actually, we don't even have to what if, right? We just have to know that in all those paintings from 400 years ago and stuff like that, people dressed up in all sorts of weird things that we think are weird today. Wigs, etc. Right?
Well, and also there are certain analogies, and I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but it sure seems similar to me, is you have Native Americans dancing around a fire with chicken outfits on or wolf outfits, or you have people in Japan in paganistic notions of these animal spirits and stuff that show up in a lot of anime and also like Miyazaki and stuff. Or you hear about people looking up into the sky and seeing like the bear, in Greek mythology about how Zeus would become a bear, and these different and werewolves and all these other kinds of, there's so many different, as I was thinking about this, I was like, wow, there are so many different cultural markers across the globe that I can point to of this transition zone between humans and animals.
Right.
And
That's fair.
Spirits being in animals and humans, like George R. R. Martin, he, one of the things that's in the books that's not in the TV shows is that all the Starks can warg.
Right.
And there's even speculation that even Sandor Clegane can warg into dogs.
Oh,
that's why he's called the Hound.
Oh.
I mean, not because there's just some connection there, but definitely, Rickon, Arya.
So warging is a thing.
They all can warg into their dogs.
Yeah.
And the warging into the dog is not just one directional. Like the more you warg into the direwolf,
the more you're a direwolf.
the more you start adopting direwolf characteristics, the more or whatever personality the direwolf had.
Right.
And the way George Martin writes, it's subtle, but you start to actually see that where Bran, upon waking, has he's a kid and he's warging into his dog, he has these feelings of wanting to eat raw meat and wanting to like chase something down, even though that's not him. That's the wolf. And so anyway, there's just so many different examples of it. It
makes sense at a primitive level before there before there was any sort of understanding about, human intelligence or IQ or language development, any of that stuff. It was probably important. Well, actually, we know that it's important for an animal, not a human, just any animal. It's important for an animal to assume things about their surroundings, even if those things are not accurate. They have to assume things because otherwise they die. So, for example, if there's movement, if you're not a predator, or probably even if you are a predator, you have to assume there's probably problems.
Yeah.
You probably need to start fleeing or doing something. Even though it's like maybe 99,000 times out of 100,000, there's not. But okay, so that's a thing. So then all of a sudden you have these creatures that have the ability to start introspecting and being like, oh, I'm like this creature and stuff. So it probably becomes important, or maybe it's just a side effect, that when you see things that are not you still give them those human traits. You're like, yeah, I mean, the rock probably is thinking weird things about me, and that frog is probably thinking, how should it kill me? And you probably attribute language and things in your head. And so all these little stories start developing about the frog said to the snake, blah, 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 blah. And then you develop kind of this kinship with the world and the animals, because as far as you know, they're thinking thoughts too, not just like you are, just in a different language. And so then it becomes kind of pretty natural from there to be like, yeah, I can identify with that leopard. That's a strong animal. Look at those claws. Look at those things.
Yeah, we have such a strong need, for whatever reason, universal across all cultures, to imbue human personalities into things that it goes way beyond living creatures.
Right.
It goes to Wilson in Castaway.
Yeah.
They've done experiments like this where they will take so they'll take like a face that is a cartoon face, and they will do something bad to the cartoon. They'll hit the cartoon face over with a hammer. Yeah. And the participants, the subjects in the research, they'll feel bad about it. They'll say things like,
"Don't do that."
Well, they'll even do one where they'll say, "Okay, here's a hammer, and I want you to hit that nut, that acorn." And so they hit the acorn. Yeah. And they're like, "And here is a inanimate stuffed teddy bear. I want you to hit the teddy bear over the head with the hammer."
Right.
And the participants, adults and kids alike, will just be like, no.
Yeah.
So there's certain people that they'll be like, I need you to hit. No, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And it's like, how and why?
Yeah.
Even if, and they even will do incentives, like if you don't hit that teddy bear over the head with that hammer, I'm not going to give you the money that we promised you.
Right.
And the people are just like, I don't care. There's no amount of money that's going to, and then so that kind of makes sense. We can all kind of relate to that, but then they try to reduce that thing down as much as we can to then they just have like the head.
Yeah.
And then they take the fur off. And then they take the mouths off, and they found it. I can't remember what they reduced it down to, but it was just like, if it was just a circle with eyes, you didn't want to hit it over there. But if it was just a circle, you could hit
fine.
it. But if it has circle with eyes,
right? And I mean, so you could imagine how the functional development was simply that out of trial and error, beings that tended to not just fully murder each other all the time survived more often.
Right.
And so then slowly but surely you're like, okay, if that thing sort of resembles me in whatever minimal way, I'm not even going to bother, or I'm not even going to risk hurting it.
Which illuminates the fact that our morality isn't a cognitive thing entirely.
Right.
It's something that's deeply ingrained in us. And even though our cognitive mind is like that circle with two eyes is nothing. It's
right.
nothing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't feel, but I can't help in my bones feeling bad if I hit it over the head.
And that's a great sort of really strong counterexample. There's this claim that some folk make that if you give up the belief in God, in any God, but they'll do that as a salvo because they really want their God, but any God, you will just as well and or probably become a nihilistic criminal, doing whatever you want and murdering because why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? That's kind of the claim. And number one, there's certainly no evidence for that. But number two, this type of experiment is certainly great counter evidence because in no belief system that I've heard, like the Bible, or maybe there are some, maybe more native ones or something.
Protect
but I've
circles
never heard,
with eyes.
Exactly. I've never heard listen, even if it looks sort of human, you better not hit it with a hammer. Yeah. That's not a thing.
Right. It's something deeply ingrained in us, and we see it across many other animal species. Yeah. This notion of fairness and of not harming other things is really quite common to others.
And it only makes sense evolutionarily. Meaning, I'm not saying that's the only way it could make sense. I'm saying it makes a lot of sense if you think in those terms.
So in getting back to your point, and then we'll move on back to the furry stuff, is that our brains are just bags of meat that is, it's just like a steak. Or it's
a well-cooked steak.
It's like slightly congealed pudding, and it doesn't have circuitry the way a computer does. It can't be like if then. It has to have these pretty broad systems that don't have a lot of precision. And one of them, like you said, is like those who evolved to see faces with eyes as good things that they don't want to hurt. Generally survived. Those that were really like this, is that a real face? Probably had at least just a second less of empathy response. That meant they didn't survive. And plus, like, what does it hurt to have you?
Right. That's the other thing is evolution is lazy, right? It's lazy not even by design, just out of the mathematical probabilities, right? So therefore, it's not going to over-engineer the thing.
Right. 200,000 years ago, there wasn't something walking around that was a circle with eyes that you needed to not have empathy for.
Hence why the color distinguishing problems we have, hence why the perception problems, all those things didn't need to be designed, didn't need to evolve.
Yeah. Hence the fact we die soon after we can't reproduce.
Exactly.
So, other speculation that I thought of, number one, is I think most people probably feel different from the mainstream in general for one reason or another. You're 16 years old and you're looking at the world and you're just like, I don't feel like I'm mainstream.
Like, I don't fit.
I don't fit into like the jock or the cheerleader. There's something different about me. And I think that there are a number of different avenues for people. I mean, I don't know about you, but I felt that way when I was young. I felt that way when I was like really young. And I think it probably had to do with me being like one of the only non-white kids in my entire, town. But it could have been something else. I don't know.
So I absolutely felt that my entire life. But one interesting little twist with it is that, or maybe a side effect, is I hated scenes and group identity. So like, I didn't want to be a grunge kid or a straight edge kid. I didn't even really want to be certainly not a goth, but not even a new wave kid, even though that was kind of my favorite kind of music, I just wanted to like those things and have my friends. But I definitely felt like, so it's kind of a push-pull. I was like, I don't feel I belong in that group. I don't feel I belong in that group.
That's interesting because I think maybe because you're 4 years younger than me, and maybe it was a little different. Probably not. For me, when I grew up, there was basically only 3 groups. You had the regular people, which you might consider like jocks, but we didn't. Our jocks / cheerleaders, like the girls who were popular were also jocks. A lot of them were soccer players, and so there was just a lot of real casual sport dress, like your Letterman's jacket, and that kind of stuff. And so that was pretty mainstream. And I could definitely fit into that as being that I was a jock in a lot of ways. And then you had like the metal guys who...
Oh, metal. I forgot that scene.
Right. Who wore like Iron Maiden stuff.
Yeah.
And I definitely wasn't in that crowd because I didn't like metal and still don't really. I mean, there's certain metal that I like, but like Slipknot and stuff is like... But, and then there was this like, what we call the pajama pants guys, or because they were like preppy, I guess you would call.
Okay.
I don't know what you call, but
therefore that at night they would probably wear pajama pants.
No, they would go to the mall and buy these expensive pants that look like pajamas to us.
What?
But they weren't really pajamas. They were just like fancy slacks.
Oh, okay.
Fancy like noisy 80s slacks.
Oh, okay.
And so. And then there wasn't really goth yet. There were very few people who were into kind of that gothy thing, but they weren't really. You know what I mean? So anyway, people associate 80s with goth, but like actually, like the most goth person I had seen in the movies in the 80s was the girl in Breakfast Club, the weird girl. Remember the weird girl?
Yeah, totally.
But she just kind of wore black.
Yeah.
But she was really weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is that I feel like a lot of people growing up feel like they're not really mainstream and they're like, okay, who are my people?
Yeah.
And if you also have this, affinity towards animals and your own identity or anime or furry things,
right.
I could see you very quickly getting kind of attracted to that world because it starts online because there's a whole furry system online. But it easily could just be Dungeons and Dragons or punk rock or metal or goth or all those other kinds of subcultures, right? Now, if you're gay or bi or trans, then you might even feel like you're more not mainstream, which is maybe another attraction to this. Number 2 is I'm guessing some people have social anxiety. I can't remember.
This is a way to armor up,
right? So I can't remember where I heard this, if it was on a podcast or someone was telling me in person. That's how much I listen to podcasts. I can't differentiate between conversations and podcasts I listen to. By the way, I have a new favorite podcast.
Oh.
It's Conan O'Brien's podcast.
What? Is this a new podcast?
No, it's been out for a long time, but for whatever reason, I didn't know about it. And I've just been binging the 35 episodes.
Is it him and Andy or just him? Or?
No, what he does, the premise is he's looking for a friend. And so he has a lot of famous people that he's known over the years as guests on his show. And he's like, will you be my friend?
Oh, I see. I thought he was looking for a long lost friend. He's looking for a new friend.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's really well produced. And Conan O'Brien is, I mean, I love him and all his, I've been watching him ever since the beginning. And
yeah.
I feel like he's just become more and more funny as he's gone.
He's so awesome.
And the when he travels and like he was in Australia recently and did a bunch of.
See, I've never seen any of that.
It's all on YouTube. You can. It's all the clip. That's where I watch it, is on YouTube.
Oh man, I'm missing out. I love Conan O'Brien.
Yeah, I mean he went to Cuba.
I gotta listen to this podcast. This might be the first podcast I listened to in a while.
Yeah, so he had to do an episode with Jimmy Kimmel and with Dax Shepard and
Nice.
And some of the episodes are better than others, but some of them are just like hilarious. I mean, the ability for Conan O'Brien to just riff. And the other thing I realized about Conan O'Brien that I like is that he seems kind of woke, even though he doesn't really speak that way. Like I'll notice some of the comedians with him will make certain jokes that are like, I think he was talking to Kevin Hart, if I'm not mistaken. And I can't remember who he was talking to. Oh, he was talking to Bill Burr. Mm-hmm. So he had Bill Burr on his podcast. And Bill Burr, no, not Bill Burr.
Bill Burr is the very offensive guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the other guy, other Irish.
Bill Maher.
No, maybe it was Bill Burr. Someone like, it's either Bill Burr or someone like Bill Burr.
Okay.
Where, he's a man's man. And my wife, she'll just nag at me when I get home. Okay. Yeah. And so they're talking and it's awkward because Conan O'Brien is like, in his head, I can tell he doesn't want to go along with this joke. Like there's a Jimmy Fallon way of doing this where you just sort of like, oh, let's change
That's
subject.
crazy.
Yeah, but Conan O'Brien's like, wow, you're pretty stuck in the past, but he makes a joke about it. You know what I mean? He doesn't like hammer. He's just like, wow, I'm not going to go along with that one. Like, it seems like you're kind of still messed up in the head. Okay. Yeah. Like he can't help but to say,
right.
Geez, that's pretty regressive. Yeah. And I never, because you don't see that in his show. You don't see Conan O'Brien having those kinds of challenges. I mean, certainly there's a lot of things you can point to what Conan O'Brien does that I'm sure is a little regressive, but the way he treats his assistant is sometimes a little cringeworthy. But anyway, I through this podcast, I've come to think, wow, he actually, coming from where he came from, it's pretty amazing that he is that progressive in his thinking. Anyway, and he does it with such ease. Like he's not preachy about it. He doesn't make it unfunny. He always finds a way to talk that is interesting. I don't know. I just have a lot of respect.
He doesn't give up the higher ground.
Yeah. So anyway, I think some people have social anxiety and so I was listening, I don't know if this is a podcast or a conversation, but someone was saying that their whole life they were socially anxious and they always felt out of place and they were super shy and never said anything. And then for some reason, they ended up having to be a mascot for a football team or something. I think this was a podcast. And they put on the furry costume for the mascot. And he said, I instantly felt okay.
Weird.
I put on that costume and I could go out on the field and do all these crazy things. I'd walk up to the opposing team's coach and I'd spank him and I'd do sexual things with the cheerleaders and
That's crazy.
The crowd was going wild, and then I'd go home and I'd take off the suit and I'd go back to my shy self.
That's fascinating.
But I can totally see this. Like you put on a mask. I mean, have you ever had that experience?
No, dude. For me, it's the opposite. This is why. Have you seen me wear a mask for more than like a second during Halloween?
Well, I have seen you with
the Jar Jar.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I instantly get claustrophobic. But beyond that. I actually, and maybe it's because I'm an extrovert, I don't know, but as soon as I cover up, I actually feel super self-conscious. It's really weird.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, I can't be myself. No one can see me. This is bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm guessing people can't see your face, and therefore you don't know if you're communicating effectively.
Yeah, probably.
And also, you don't know what your face is conveying because your face has like this permanent emotional expression.
Right.
And so, that's an interesting litmus test as to how maybe extroverted you are or something. Like, would you rather have a mask on your head all party or not on your head?
And I'm okay, like, so now modifiers, like, a little hat or whiskers drawn or something like that, I'm all game for it, but something that fully covers me, I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
Even, and not only the face, also like a suit, the idea of a suit. And I swear it also has something to do with claustrophobia because I'm like, get me out of this thing.
Yeah.
I was at an auction last weekend where I was helping people as they were coming in to register. And it's really interesting. You can really tell right away who is sort of easy to improv with or easy to just kind of strike up a conversation and who is very guarded. Because as they come in, I would inevitably say little jokes like, ooh, it looks like your credit card's been declined, or, things like this, or, it doesn't look like we have you in the system.
Yeah. And some people will just be like, really? And you're like, oh, no, I'm just joking. And they're like, oh.
Right. So I got all the spectrum of reactions, right? Some people were like, ha, 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 like some people were what you just said. Other people almost made no reaction, and they almost didn't want to interact at all. I was like, oh, okay.
Which in some, contexts, it's like, come on, pal, just give me my goddamn registration. But you're going to an auction, which is almost always pretty gregarious.
It was also themed. It was a themed auction where they had to kind of dress up and stuff.
Yeah.
Speak of furries.
Right. Number 3 reason that I can think of is that some people have retained their magical thinking from growing up. The anonymous patron mentioned something about this, is that, she said something like, some of those, let's see what she said exactly. Some of these people are very fantasy prone, and it feels like, that they're themselves finally when they do that. And I think that, one of the things that I've noticed in people is it won't be apparent like, oh, that person's very magical thinking, but you'll see the symptoms, like believing in, I won't go down this road, but certain belief systems in our culture are much more magical.
Sure.
In a sense. Like, well, I will say it. So astrology, for example.
Sure.
Astrology.
That one's real, but there are others.
Yeah. Now, whether or not you believe in it, whatever, the point is that, or even just fanatic religion, Christianity, to not even fanatic, but just like certain ideals or ideas with, I'm really having a hard time.
Yeah.
But anyway, like the belief in like angels and demons walking around among us, there's a certain way of thinking about that for some people who retain a magical thinking paradigm,
right,
they are much more likely to believe in those kinds of things. Now, when you meet them, you won't go, oh, they're very magical thinking. When you meet them, they'll just have these other points of view that may or may not agree with yours.
Yeah.
Now, for some people, this magical thinking is a quirk. It's just something about them, personality trait. But sometimes we can actually point to arrested development and trauma and having gone through mistreatment early in life, where certain processes of your early personality at the age of 3, 4, or 5 are retained. All 3, 4, 5-year-olds are magical thinkers.
Right.
They think they can, especially like 3-year-olds, who they literally think that the world operates in this magical way because they just don't understand. They don't understand how physics works.
Yeah.
To them, the fact that you can get into a car and go to work and
that's magic, and
you can go into a store and buy something, or that someone can buy you a dog.
Right.
To them it seems magical.
It's
to you.
all magic,
and so they think Santa Claus is real, and I can actually fly if I think so, or I'm actually Princess Ella because that's who I am right now.
Yeah.
And so when you have some interruptions in your development at that time, you can kind of retain a little bit of that into adulthood, but it won't look the same. So
Right.
you can imagine if you still retain that, you'd still have this magical way of thinking about animals and your personality and that kind of thing.
And man, kids can get really upset if you challenge their magic.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Even older kids too. Like, I don't know how old, but where you're saying, well, you know, you're not really, oh my gosh, it can be,
Yeah.
you can be at war.
Right. Also, another thing that I thought of just now that is now leaving me
is how people forget things all the time.
So it had to do with going through difficulties early in life. Oh, so when you go through difficulties early in life, you develop a need to escape, to dissociate in the minor way, and you develop a fantasy life where you kind of go inward and you think about all these happy times.
Right.
And if your home life wasn't very good, you could imagine that for some of those people, they might be attracted to the furry lifestyle. Now, I'm not pathologizing the furry lifestyle. Most people have gone through mistreatment in life. Most people have to have some way of coping with that mistreatment. I'm just saying maybe for some people it resonates that the narrative that because they went through the mistreatment, it led to certain personality traits that led them to enjoy the furry lifestyle. Also, so here's another thing that I thought of that I didn't see any evidence of, but I just seem like, and if you're a furry out there, please let me know. I could see of the few psychopaths that are out there in the world, I could see them maybe being attracted to the fursuits because they can hide behind these masks and exploit other people.
Oh.
Now, I didn't see any reports of that or anything, but I don't know. I just thought like
I actually, again, I would bet the opposite. Like that would call too much attention or something.
But imagine you're at a furry convention and you're a psychopath and you're in a mask.
All right. I know, sure. Just like in any distribution of people, there's probably, but I'm saying I would be surprised if there was a special affinity there.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
Also, it's like there's plenty of other venues you can exploit people where you don't have to pay $5,000 for a suit. The last thing is that Japan and its culture has really spread around the world.
Oh, right.
And Japan has always, or for a long time, had this culture of cuteness that is way beyond anything Americans could ever dream of.
Is it also like South Korea now? And was it always the case, or was it spread? Or
well, Japan occupied. Some of my ancestors actually occupied South Korea.
Okay.
So South Korea and Korea, in general, has retained a lot of Japanese culture.
Okay.
I can't really speak with authority about Korea. Obviously, Korea and Japan are so close.
Yeah.
But I definitely do know that Japan, for a long time, has had this extreme saturation of cute culture that when we look at it, we're all used to in our culture with 5-year-old girls into cute things, or 13-year-old girls into cute things, like Hello Kitty is the prime example. Well, in Japan, everyone is into cute things.
Yeah.
Men and women, grandma, grandpa, everybody. Now, it is skewed more towards women and more towards young people.
Yeah.
But in the same way that among 45-year-old men, a certain percentage of them will like Hello Kitty. Well, a much larger percentage of 45-year-old men in Japan like Hello Kitty.
Right.
And so...
and then the degree of cuteness is also way higher.
Way higher.
Here, you have a little smile, a little twinkle in the eye, maybe a little pink bow on the head. There it's like 50 pink bows on one side of the head,
right,
and 20 glitter glosses on the eye. And
right. It is over the top compared to our sensibilities. And this furry culture is cute. I mean, I don't know what you have. Have you seen pictures of actual furry conventions?
I don't think so.
So before looking into this, when I thought of furries, I thought of like what I think were actually pranksters who, there used to be these YouTube videos where those guys would run around in those.
Oh, sure. Like jackass people.
Yeah. And they would tackle people.
Yeah.
That's what I was like, kind of gross.
Yeah.
These furry convention people, and they're mainly kids. They're like 22-year-old kids. They all look cute. Like that they have sort of form-fitting furry outfits with
I see.
funny, they'll have like a tuxedo on and they have this funny head. And I mean, it is like legitimately, it's very non-offensive. It's very non-threatening.
Okay.
And
so I'm not hearing anything about sex in all of this.
right. So we'll get to that next. Right. So to me, it just seems like play in the same way that people like to play fantasy football.
Right.
It's just something, or a board game or cards. It's also pretend time like Dungeons and Dragons. It's fun. You get friends. You get to meet people. And it's similar to a lot of other things. Okay, so let's get into the sexual thing. So what's the sexual stigma or the stereotype about furries out there?
I mean, I always thought, it's true. Like the only thing I had really heard about furries for a long time was seeing in a few shows or movies where, someone shows up in a furry costume and, it's to have sex with someone else who didn't realize they were a furry or something like that. And that the whole point is that they enjoy having sex in the costumes.
Right. Where did that come from, do you think? Because after looking into this, and I'll cut to the chase here, furries aren't any more sexual than anybody else.
Yeah.
So when, and there's no data because how would you know? But from what I can tell, it's like, there are people who do the Mile High Club, for example.
Yeah.
Well, when you see someone with a plane ticket, you don't go like, oh, Mile High Club. They're just like, what? They're like,
I'm going on a flight.
I'm just going on a flight.
To have sex in the bathroom. What?
I mean, some people who get on a plane have sex in the bathroom, but most don't.
Most have it in the seat.
The main reason for having a plane ticket is to travel. And, or another thing is like, some people have sex in the movie theater.
Right.
Like occasionally.
And so you're like, I'm going to a movie tonight.
Oh. Or like whenever you wanted to have a movie and there would be a punchline about this over-sexualized creep.
Right.
They would have a movie ticket in his hand. It's like, for us, because we go to movies, we'd be like, well, that's dumb because most people don't have sex.
Right.
Well, I think for furries, it's the same thing. It's like, you clearly don't understand the world. Like,
well, it'd be like the same if you see in a TV show someone dressed up as a Trekkie, it's like, oh, sex freak.
Right. Do some people role play as Spock and Kirk and have sex? Positively, yes. That's happened probably thousands of times. But when you look at a Trekkie, you don't go, oh, sexy times. It's this weird cultural. I wonder what like the ground zero was or patient zero was for that joke to be made, because it doesn't. I mean, unless there's something attractive about that joke to a fur costume. I mean, what do you think?
That is really fascinating. I think it's because it's probably a couple things actually. I do remember one handful of 80s movies that had this trope. For example, do you remember Trading Places?
Yeah.
Right?
The gorilla.
Okay, so there's that. Then there was the one in the park where they gets tied to what movie is that? It's like it's a very famous 80s movie.
Well, Men at Work.
Yes.
They weren't dressed up as, they just took their clothes off.
Okay, fine. Sorry. Isn't there something with Spies Like Us when they're dressed like a cow? Isn't there a thing?
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
They're dressed as a cow. Well, I don't know about it was that movie or.
And then Porky's, even though there's probably no furry stuff in Porky's, it's like named after a pig and the sign's got like a pig. And so like I think in the 80s we got indoctrinated like any animal stuff is sexual.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean it could be. So have you heard of yiffing?
No.
So yiffing, can you imagine what that is? Yiffing?
Like from GIFs? Like
No,
yiffing. No.
So it's a verb to yiff.
To yiff. I mean, rubbing your animal parts together?
No, well, maybe. I guess that's part of it. But It's essentially, I don't know how it's used in sentences, but it's essentially when furries have sex.
Okay.
Or when they're asking to have sex.
Why? What's the...
Well, it's named apparently after a sound that foxes make.
Oh, I was right about the fox.
So apparently and maybe even biologists, when they study foxes, they even call it yiffing. I don't know. So
Are foxes common furry targets?
I don't know. What percentage of men and women report viewing furry pornography?
Oh, sorry. And by the way, let's not forget about Catwoman.
Yeah.
All right. Percentage that view furry pornography?
Yeah.
I don't know, 5%.
96% of men.
Come on.
And 78% of women.
No. Of like average people?
Average furries.
Oh, no. Okay, sorry. Average furries that watch furry pornography.
Yeah.
Oh, my bad. I thought you meant like normal, like everyone.
Yeah.
Okay. So out of furries, most of them watch furry pornography.
Yeah.
Okay, well then maybe there is something to the sex thing.
Right. Well, but that's just looking at porn. And what do we mean by...
but looking at furry porn.
Right. But the other thing I'm curious about is what is furry porn? Because
not to use your earlier analogy, you and I love going on trips, but we don't watch airplane porn. We like going to the movies. We don't watch movie porn.
But have you ever seen porn on an airplane?
No.
Have you ever seen a porn that's depicted on an airplane?
Sure, but like one out of a billion.
So if you were asked a question, so that's what I want to know from these surveys, because they're not very specific. Is like, if they asked you, have you seen porn?
Oh, okay, sure.
Oh, you like to fly in airplanes? Oh, have you ever looked at porn that's depicted on an airplane?
Sure,
and you're like, yeah.
Okay.
Sexual.
Okay, but I don't know. I mean, that would be a very deceptive way to present that.
But these surveys could be deceptive too. Anyway, but I think it is actually a thing. I think for many furry people, they get it. So it's the same with anime. I consider the furry thing to be very close to anime. So if you're into anime, there's a very good chance that you have at least perused, if not quote unquote used, porn that is anime oriented, either video or pictures. You know what I mean? Like a sexy anime character person, and you've whacked off to it on some level. And so to some people that might sound very strange, like you're whacking off to a cartoon, but anime culture and furry culture is for adults for the most part. And so anyway, what percentage say that sexual attraction is an important part of their furry activity?
Okay, well then I'm going to go 70%.
37%.
Oh, man. Okay.
You got some good ones earlier.
My hypotheses are being busted up.
What hypothesis?
I was thinking, like, if so many of them, maybe this lends some to the fact that the question wasn't well formed, because if 96% of them were like, yeah, I watch furry porn, then I would have thought that a lot of them would have been like, yeah, my sexuality is all tied up in this stuff.
But like pornography, I mean, just think about people that in the sort of pornography practices that people have.
Yeah.
Like people will watch, there's so much pornography out there. People watch a lot of different kinds of porn.
Sure.
But when it comes, how many, like for the average person, if you just took all the different categories of porn they look at, how many of those people actually participate or want to participate in those activities out in their real life? I would say like 3% of the porn they look at, they actually want to enact in their real life. You know what I mean?
No, I get that. That's fair. But there is this other difference, like the furry stuff, as we saw earlier in the survey, it's not just about, hey, I kind of like these cartoons, these comics, whatever, so I'm going to go to this furry comic. I mean, it is, I'm sure, for some percentage of people, but it seems like for some good percentage of them, it is an identity thing too.
Right.
And so if, for example, let's say you were very into the sports identity of the Seahawks, I wonder, is there a Seahawks or sports porn affinity to people that are very into sports?
Probably.
And I'm curious because...
Like the cheerleaders, for example.
Yeah. I wonder. I
or
would actually
for women
say,
looking at the men,
Yeah, it could be.
I mean, how many women masturbated to Michael Jordan?
Yeah, it's at least I think they published those numbers. It was
It's got to be high. Or
Sure.
who's Beckham, whatever that guy's name was. Like, how many women masturbated to Beckham?
Sure.
Like,
Well,
and so it's like, and they were sports fans. So again, it's like, but how many of those women who masturbated to Beckham, when you ask them how important is sexuality to your soccer,
they would have said, no, it's not very important.
Yeah, so I've masturbated to Beckham, but I love soccer for soccer. I don't love it for sexuality. Now,
Still 30-some%.
right, still about a third of people. So when you go to a convention, a third of, at least, about a third of those people are thinking it's an important part. Now, they probably think there's a lot of other important parts,
Well, and given that the community is small, relatively speaking,
and given the fact that many of them are gay and bi,
and that there is furry porn, I would anticipate many of them are in the furry porn.
And when I say gay and bi, what I mean is like it's basically a young men's game.
Yeah.
And if you're a young gay male,
Yeah.
a furry convention is
A good place to go furry.
Yeah. What percentage of furries have fantasies about having sex with animals?
That
That one took you by surprise.
2%.
17%.
Oh my God.
Dude,
That's
it's just
high.
fantasies. And,
All right.
and a lot of non-furries have fantasies.
all right.
What percentage are sexually aroused by stuffed animals?
Oh God. Oh no. Poor stuffies. 20%.
1%.
Oh, good. Wait, actually, that is surprisingly low.
Another revelation
Yeah.
into Berto's mind. So the bottom line is that it's probably a little bit more sexualized than other things like Dungeons and Dragons, for example. But the vast majority of activities don't have anything to do with sex. And I didn't see any data or even anecdotal evidence around the sexual deviancy being like a theme within it any more than any other convention. Like you go to a boating convention, there's going to be a few sexual predators. You go to a technology convention, there's going to be a certain percentage of sexual deviants.
Do you think that they sell furry outfits for real dolls?
What do you mean, the sex dolls or?
Yeah, the real doll sex dolls.
Yeah, I could see that.
I mean, I guess you could just buy any furry outfit and put it on them.
Right. Or you just get a giant teddy bear.
You just need to cut some holes strategically.
So is there stigma? What can we point to say that there's stigma?
Yeah, I mean, our reaction, or at least mine, is probably pretty common, is like, what? You're into what? Like I said, media seems to depict them in a specific stigmatized way. And the stigmas, I'd be like, okay, so you are sort of a kinky little creature, aren't you? And you probably are into real animals, aren't you? And you probably murder a lot. No, just kidding. I'm attacking on stuff that doesn't.
So I was reading about one guy's account on Reddit, and he was talking about how it was 100 times easier for him to come out as gay.
Wow.
So put that in perspective.
Jeekers.
So he's a gay furry.
Oh my goodness.
And his family and friends know he's gay.
But he doesn't want to tell me he's a furry.
But he doesn't want to tell him that he's a furry.
Jeekers. That's intense.
Yeah, that's pretty sad that us as a culture have created this world where this very small group of people feel like they can't even tell their own parents.
Yeah.
Because imagine what parents would find when they Google it.
Cute little furries.
And what they find is what we put up there.
Yeah.
And what we perpetuate and what we allow to be out there.
Sure.
So just put that in perspective.
You can see their parents, they're sitting there in their little bunny and bear outfits, just having had sex. And they're like, oh, is this what he's into? Oh my gosh, check this out, Hilda.
So why is there stigma, do you think?
Well, I mean, like I said, I think TV shows and movies have used it as punchlines.
But why was it a punchline to begin with?
Well, I mean, there is something unusual about a grown person dressed in a cute, furry outfit of an animal.
Right.
And bestiality is a taboo thing. And
Right. So, well, particularly the first part you said is that to Americans, it's weird for adults to dress up in these outfits. For Japanese people and other cultures, it's not, or it's much less so anyway. And so for us, we associate all those kinds of things with children. And to have adults doing it feels weird. I mean, we still have people walking around going like, I'm not going to see a Pixar movie. That's a cartoon. That's for kids.
Right.
And I'm just like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Pixar movies are the best adult, and they're made for kids too.
Yeah.
But these are the best stories that adults should be consuming that have ever been made.
Right.
And Miyazaki movies,
It's hilariously arbitrary, especially to think that
Avengers is 90% cartoon, by the way.
Right. It's hilarious that it's like these photons that are hitting my eyeballs, which to most computer systems would be indistinguishable from the other photons, are completely unacceptable as entertainment.
Yeah.
And yet it's like the same stories.
Right. But there are still people who adhere to that. And they're just like, I'm not going to see a cartoon. And I'm just like, man, open your eyes. So I think that's one thing. I also think that, well, I know that we live in a very sex negative culture, like just a massively we like to think, oh, 2019, we got through the 60s where, women's lib and sexual liberation. It's like, no. One, the 80s happened.
Yeah.
Two, AIDS happened and just say no and, blah, blah, blah. Or abstinence only, I should say. And we still live in an extremely sex negative culture. And so let's just say that furries was 100% about disgusting sex.
Right.
Let's just say every furry, they pop that thing on and they just
go to town.
They just go to town on each other. They have sex at these conventions on the floor.
Where they have to burn all the outfits at the end.
There's just like fluids everywhere.
Yes.
And it's like, who the fuck cares? What is it to you that these consenting adults want to have sex in whatever fucking way they want to, in the same way that we look to gay and bi people and be like, why should you judge them?
Right.
They're just doing what they want to do with consenting people in behind closed doors. They're not bothering you. The furry people aren't bothering you with it. What is it to you? But somehow to us, it's like, well, because it seems which leads me to another reason why we have stigma is for whatever reason in our culture, we decide that certain things are okay to ridicule and certain things aren't. In the past, it was okay to ridicule gay people. Even just 10 years ago, we had kids walking around going, and even adults walking around, that's so gay.
Yeah.
Or, ooh, I'm a limp-wristed man. I'm gay. It was up until 10 years ago, that was just like common comedic material. We've decided, wisely that that's not okay.
Right.
But for whatever reason, like furries are completely up for grabs.
Well, I love how hey, where are you going this weekend? Oh, dude, I'm going to go get in this little boat with one paddle on a level 5 rapids. I could die. It's going to be great. Wow, that's awesome. What about you, Bob? Oh, I'm going to go jump off of this airplane with this little piece of cloth attached to my back. Oh, man, that's amazing. And you? I'm going to a furry convention. Oh, my God, you're sick in the head.
Right.
You're so aberrant.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Because one has something maybe to do with sexuality. Yeah, it's insane.
Who in their right mind would do that?
Right. Or even better yet, I am going to ride motorcycles in the dunes, meaning by implication, you're going to pollute and maybe destroy habitats and litter and maybe even hurt animals or yourself or something. And it's like,
that's fine. That's cool. Badass.
Good. Four-wheeling in the dunes.
I'm going to go. I have a new AR-15. I'm going to actually use it this weekend to go hunting. I'm going to go kill. Oh, are you hungry? Are you starving? No, my fridge is full. I'm just going. Sports. Yeah. It's called a sport.
But someone wants to dress up in a furry outfit and maybe like think about sexual things.
Actually, I'm literally going to dress up in a furry outfit to camouflage myself while I shoot the animals.
Yeah.
But you're going to a furry convention.
Yeah.
You're sick in the head.
Yeah. We live in the dumbest culture that ever lived. I just have to say. I mean, or every culture is stupid. It just fucking aggravates me. You know, you see the Matrix and you're just like, what the fuck, Matrix? What are you doing, people? Like, think logically about this. Why are we making fun of these people? Why do we do this to ourselves? I mean, we make up the rules. It's us against us. Why do we should be pointing at politicians who don't believe or follow the recommendations of environmentalism, because that is currently, what did I tell you? Something like this. One stat is like half of the species have already been extinct in the past 50 years because of our activity. We are not we should be fucking laughing in the streets. We should be there should be memes about like politicians not sticking up for the environment. And forget about the environment. Think about ourselves. This is self-preservation. Even if you don't give a fuck about the animals, you don't give a fuck about the temperature, we are going to suffer, or our kids. Do you not care about our kids?
No, dude.
I mean,
I know, I hear you, but the furries are kind of weird, man.
I think another thing is fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
So when people don't know shit, they're like, ew, it's weird, scary. And yeah, those are my reasons. So another thing I found about the stigma was that there's some anecdotes, I'm sure more research will come out about this in the future, is that some people are even becoming suicidal, probably at least in part due to this stigma. You know, they really, so one thing that I haven't really emphasized is for some people in the furry community, this is a minority, I think, this is like very, very important to them.
Sure.
Like they are like, this is me, man. Like when I think about myself as a fox or whatever, and I put on that fox outfit, I feel like me. I feel like I'm like trans species, essentially. Yeah. I feel like I can't really be, I realize I can't be a fox, but I have to tell you, like in my normal skin walking around, I just feel off. But when I put on that furry outfit, I feel exactly who I am. Mm-hmm. And I want to go to work in my furry outfit.
Right.
I want to get married in my furry outfit. I want to talk to my parents in my furry outfit. And I just want people to like accept it and be okay with it. But I know that'll never happen, and I can't be myself. And that makes me sad, and that makes me want to kill myself. You know, there's just certain people that are in that situation. Now, that's, I think, a very small minority of the people, but I could imagine that happening.
Okay. But this is where I was saying earlier, where it is an important question. At which point does believing something or wanting something that is not properly supported, it's a really difficult line to draw between pathology versus inevitability. So, for example, you know, who says that it's any easier for your brain to switch gears about this topic than it would be about, like you were saying, wanting to be male or female, or about wanting to be thin or fat, or about wanting to eat meat or not meat, or whatever, right? It might be just as hard or harder for your brain, for you to switch your brain's gears about it. It could be like depression. Like if you're depressed, you're depressed, right? But in many cases, it seems like we say, hey, you know, things are fine. You can have mental models and things, but when those start really making it very difficult for you to live your life in a productive, healthy way, then maybe we pathologize it. But where is that line when society is doing the pathologizing?
I'll tell you where the line is. When I can blame it entirely on society, it has nothing to do with the individual. If we lived in a society where being Umberto, however you like to be, whatever aspect we want to point to, the fact that you like to wear socks, the fact that you like to talk on a podcast, has been identified arbitrarily as pathology or abnormal, or, you know, at the end of the bell curve. To me, like, that's not okay, right? And so when I can look at a furry person and I can be like, what harm does it do? Now we can look we can look at psychopaths and sadists. You know, they get pleasure from, and even if they are quote unquote born that way, they get pleasure from harming other people.
Yeah.
I'm okay with pathologizing that one.
Okay, but so, and again, this is where the hot water, of course, starts. But I'm going to be sympathetic and say something extremely controversial, but be super sympathetic to this notion. If you rewind the clock, say 50 years, certainly 100 years, but let's say 50 years, and you're in a business meeting with suits, everyone's got their suit, and everyone's a man because there's no women in business, and this is how it is. It's horrible, right? It's by today's standards, but that's how it is. And all of a sudden, the new hire comes in, and it is a transvestite wearing sort of like a female dress, but their body is clearly male, and it's very obvious that this doesn't fit in this, right? Mm-hmm. I actually would totally empathize with, of course, they're going to feel terrible, and that sucks, but I would empathize with the other, say, 12 board members going, I can't work like this.
I empathize with it.
Right.
But it takes 3 seconds of thought to say, this has no bearing on us.
No, it doesn't take 3 seconds of thought for the average human being. It takes a whole lifetime,
right.
Maybe.
And, which I agree with.
Yeah.
I mean, there are still gay and lesbian haters amongst us, by the way. And they've been given decades of opportunities, particularly when you think about different media depictions, right. Ellen, for example, right. To realize that they're just like you and they're not to be afraid. They're nothing to be afraid of. So I say, because to me, it's like, well, I can empathize for sure. Like one of the things that I got in an argument with a family member a long time ago, he was saying that he understands why some businesses would, this was in the 90s, he understood why some businesses would deny, like restaurants, they would deny allowing gay people to eat at their restaurant.
Right.
And I was like, what the fuck? And he's like, well, you and I know that gay people don't automatically have HIV. And you and I know even if they did have HIV, that doesn't mean that they're going to transmit it to the other customers. Right. But the customers don't know that.
Right.
And if someone who looks gay, quote unquote, comes into your restaurant, that could completely destroy your restaurant because of the way society sees that. Yeah. So I understand that conundrum. I mean, if I'm a business owner and I'm just like, I'm gay myself, and I'm like, look, gay guy, you can't be in here because no one's, my business is going to go underground, is going to, go underwater because of, not because of you, but because society thinks something wrong about you. So you got to go.
And it takes courageous people, because you could do the same thing with black people, with Hispanics, with women, with whatever.
So I have sympathy and I guess empathy for the feelings of those people, but I don't say, and therefore let's keep allowing this to happen. Right. What I say is like, I can, for now in this transition zone, I can sympathize, but at the same time, let's fucking move this thing forward, people.
Right. Now, I still also claim that, I question. There might have to be a line, or maybe there isn't. But so here's one extreme example. Let's say I actually start feeling like I actually feel like a gorilla. It's not just that he's my spirit furry or whatever. I actually feel like a gorilla. And gorillas don't wear clothes, first of all. So I'm going to start not wearing clothes. I want to go to work as a gorilla. The other thing is, man, gorillas don't use a bathroom. Like, they just go wherever. Now, I will cover it with twigs, but I'm going to, like, imagine this extreme, right? Now, it's very easy for us to go, well, you're being ridiculous. It's like, well, wait. Seriously, picture that. Seriously, picture that I identify as a gorilla, and that's what makes me happy.
So
and
you're
if
talking,
I can't, I'm going to commit suicide.
Okay, you're talking to the wrong person, because since I was a very young person, I was like, all this shit has got to go. Like, I'm okay with everyone making their own choices. Like, I like to wear clothes, but I want equally another person to be like, I don't want to wear clothes, because there's no logical reason. Now,
but
again,
that's not how the human brain works, because people can't.
I have sympathy for people to have their cultural notions challenged, but there are places
It's
in the
not,
world.
It's not even that. It's just you were not computers, like you said. I mean, I always challenge you on that, but for now,
you
you're
can get used
right.
to anything. People now, most people in the United States are hetero. Most of those people who were alive in the 80s had negative views about gay people. Most of those people have been enlightened because they changed their minds, because they forced themselves or they got exposed to things or something. People could change their attitudes. Now, you're giving an extreme example, but to me, if that were the case, I would say my position would be, now I'm not dictator. I'm just one person among 350 million Americans.
Yep.
I'm one voter, but my vote would be on that person should be allowed to do that. Now, to take a shit in the middle of a break room, I would say, that's sanitary issue.
Right. Well, I'm actually not, because I say, no, it's not a free universe, period. End of story.
Yeah.
There is no freedom, period, end of
You
story.
can't harm
Now,
other people.
But
You can't
humans,
you can't throw your feces at the boss's
and
face
harm
when
isn't
you're
just,
upset.
Right. Harm isn't only about direct physical contact, or
Although
although
that
I'd
would-
argue that the molecules from the feces contacting your nose is direct physical contact. And photons are also direct physical, well, at least energetic contact. But what I will say is, dude, for example, I'm not the kind of person that could actually, easily transition to concentrating if females were walking around naked in the office. Now, I guess if that became the norm, I'd probably have to go to therapy and yoga training and meditation. And then over time, I would get over it and it'd be fine, right? Fair enough. But I have rights too. And I have a right to I liked working in a different way. I don't like working in this way. And so what I'm saying is it can't be an all or nothing. Because certainly,
Right.
if it wasn't all or nothing, then you'd say, well, you're right. That's why women should never have been allowed in the workplace. That's why women should never be allowed in the army, right? And that is clearly an extreme.
Right. Throughout history, as you're pointing out, there have been multiple when we look back on it, we're like,
Right.
dudes, let it go.
Yeah.
Women in the military?
Right.
Well, that's too distracting. This is a matter of life and death, son. We can't have women. And then after a while, it's like, oh, it's fine. It's fine to have women in the military. Now, we're not fine with women in the military yet. We still have problems. Women are being
Right.
sexually assaulted at a much higher rate in those environments. It's not like universal, of course.
Right.
So, but it's we're old enough to remember a time when there were just like women or gays in the military, trans people in the military, and so. Yeah, it takes time, and I think it takes some wisdom to be able to detect things. To me, when I think about history and I think about the meanings of life and what we're doing on this planet and what our priorities should be, if someone wants to be a furry, then they should be a furry, and they should be allowed to do that. Now, if I had a furry friend and they wore that head thing where I couldn't see their face, I would tell them, by the way, it's hard for me to communicate with you with that thing on because it doesn't emote. I don't like it when people wear sunglasses when they're talking.
Yeah, I think.
But I wouldn't say they can't do it. I'd be like,
but the point is that limits have to be imposed. For example, let's say that part of my new furry identity or whatever identity is that I sleep during the day and we throw wild parties at night. Now, on the one hand, you're like, great, that sounds awesome for you. But all my neighbors are trying to sleep.
Right.
So they call the cops and I go like, too bad. This is my identity. This is what we do.
No,
But
it's
can't the
affecting-
neighbors get used to it?
No.
Wear earplugs. Yeah, wear earplugs.
No.
Well, dude, you are not being accommodating.
Well, even if I did wear earplugs, it would still bother me.
Well, close. You can get these blinds
if
that
I could
kind of like
effectively,
really
if
cover the light.
if I could effectively
Yeah.
completely rid myself of any of the noise, then sure.
Yeah, well, we'll buy you. We will buy you the earplugs.
If the earplugs work, then fine.
Right. So
It
what's
must
the
not
problem?
be that loud.
Well-
That's not a problem.
Well, I mean, you might
If
hear
my
a little
sleep-
thumping. I guess
Well,
you'll hear
then-
the bass thumping.
Then that's still affecting
But
me.
that's what we do. You got to get used to it.
That
You should accommodate your life to because this is what I want to do.
right. So it takes some wisdom to be able to, and
that's why
personal opinion.
that's why my extreme. Just because it's work doesn't mean you don't like working in a certain way. Just because you are at work doesn't mean all your likes and dislikes should be ignored.
Right. So takes wisdom, takes a conversation,
Right.
it takes some
Right.
contemplation. And I think, without going hypothetical, we have human beings in our society who would like to, maybe perhaps more often than they are now, be able to wear their
Yeah.
fur costume in public, just
Certainly.
go to Starbucks and get a cup of coffee,
Certainly.
and just have no ridicule.
Certainly.
Maybe people are like, ooh, interesting outfit, but it's not ridicule.
Certainly.
They-
And there should be zero, in any case, in all of these cases, in all of the above, ever any violence or threats of any kind.
right.
Of course. I think what I'm ultimately saying is, I think us on the left often shoot ourselves in the foot of expanding the reach when we act inflexibly and unempathetically to the fact that humans do not change overnight and we are not machines that we
agree.
can be reprogrammed in a second.
I agree. And I don't have a lot of sympathy for people who can't think for half a second and go like, oh, that doesn't affect someone walking to the store in a furry costume doesn't affect me.
Right.
I should not ridicule that. And I should not like go to a PTA meeting to like stop something from happening.
Sure.
Like, oh, there's probably bigger fish to fry than this one.
Certainly, if we're all okay with like our little kids sitting on some furry red and white old dude, then at Christmas,
The original furries.
yeah.
All right, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle, in which I did not expect to argue with Humberto, but I did. Please take care of yourself, because
You deserve it.